Imagine discovering that you are secretly the heir to one of the largest aristocratic fortunes in British history. You are entitled to castles, vast estates, and millions of pounds. But there is just one problem. The only way to legally prove your claim is to dig up your grandfather's grave and prove to the courts that his coffin is completely empty. What starts as a wild family rumor in the late 1890s quickly spirals into a 10-year legal war, a stock market scam, and the most anticipated grave robbery in the history of the British Empire. Welcome to Exhibit Absurd. To understand this legal circus, we have to start with one of the wealthiest and most eccentric men in British history, William John Cavendish Scott Bentinck, the 5th Duke of Portland. Born in 1800, the Duke came from premier aristocratic stock. His grandfather was literally a British Prime Minister. When he inherited the title in 1854, his personal estate was valued at over £600,000. In today's money, that is roughly 70 million in liquid cash alone, not including the sprawling, priceless land holdings like Welbeck Abbey that functionally made him a modern billionaire. By the mid 1800s, the Duke had developed a paralyzing fear of human interaction. He refused to let doctors or servants speak to him. He installed double letterboxes on his doors so he could issue written orders without ever seeing a human face. If he had to venture out during the day, he wore two heavy overcoats, a massive top hat, and hid behind a giant umbrella. If he walked outside at night, a servant had to walk 40 yards ahead of him with a lantern to warn people to look away. He was so desperate to avoid society that he hired thousands of men to dig over 15 miles of underground tunnels beneath his estates at Welbeck Abbey, including an underground ballroom painted entirely pink and the second largest indoor riding house in the world. He was the ultimate phantom billionaire. But according to one very loud, very stubborn woman, he was also living a double life. Enter Thomas Charles Druce, a highly successful, completely normal Victorian furniture merchant who ran the Baker Street Bazaar in London. Druce died in 1864 and was buried in Highgate Cemetery. The Duke of Portland died 15 years later in 1879. The two men had nothing to do with each other until 1897. That year, Druce's elderly daughter-in-law, Anna Maria Druce, burst into a London ecclesiastical court with a bombshell claim. She swore that her late father-in-law and the Duke of Portland were the exact same person. According to her, the reclusive Duke had gotten bored, slapped on a fake beard, and lived a double life as a furniture salesman. Anna Maria claimed that by 1864, the Duke was tired of pretending to be a merchant. So, he faked Thomas Druce's death, held a mock funeral, and buried a coffin filled with lead just to kill off his alter ego. Here is why this mattered. The 5th Duke of Portland had died in 1879, unmarried and without a legitimate heir. His massive estates and the dukedom had passed to a cousin. Anna Maria discovered her father-in-law had left a respectable £70,000 estate, which is roughly £11.5 million or over $15.4 million in today's money. But she became convinced that Druce was actually the Duke in disguise. Therefore, Anna Maria argued her children weren't just the heirs to a multi-million-dollar furniture shop. They were the true heirs to the multi-billion-dollar Portland Empire. She demanded the courts open the grave to prove it. For years, the actual Druce family fought her in court, terrified of the scandal. By 1903, the courts had had enough of her wild conspiracy theories, and Anna Maria was quietly committed to a lunatic asylum. Case closed, right? Not even close, because the absolute wildest part of this legal saga was just beginning. In 1905, an obscure Australian relative named George Hollamby Druce arrived in London to take up the fight. But George didn't have the money to take on a duke's estate in court, so he did what any brilliant, legally ambitious mastermind would do. He turned his lawsuit into an IPO. George actually founded a public corporation called the Druce-Portland Company and sold shares to the British public. The pitch was simple: buy a share of his lawsuit, and if he wins the dukedom, you get a massive payout from the estate. This was highly illegal under the medieval English laws of champerty. Champerty is a legal doctrine that forbids a third party with no direct connection to a lawsuit from funding it in exchange for a cut of the profits. The law originated centuries ago for a very specific reason: to stop opportunists from buying weak legal claims, drumming up fake evidence, and corrupting the justice system for profit, which is ironically exactly what George was doing. But the public didn't care. The company raised an astonishing £30,000 from gullible investors desperate to fund a legal war. Armed with a massive corporate war chest, George launched a ruthless legal attack. Since he couldn't get a direct order to open the grave, he used a loophole. He accused his own uncle, Herbert Druce, of perjury, claiming Herbert lied to the government when he swore he saw his father die in 1864. Suddenly, George began producing a parade of witnesses out of thin air. People who swore under oath that they had seen the Duke and Druce swap places, or that they had helped pack the coffin with lead. The press went wild. The scandal threatened to tear the British aristocracy apart. Finally, with the threat of a man going to prison for perjury, the government caved. In December 1907, the Home Office ordered the exhumation of the grave. The cemetery was completely locked down. A massive wooden shed was built over the Druce family vault to keep out the thousands of screaming spectators and reporters. Doctors, lawyers, and surveyors descended into the crypt. They found the old oak coffin, brushed off 40 years of dust, and pried open the lid. And inside, they did not find lead. They did not find stones. They found the unmistakable, well-preserved corpse of Thomas Charles Druce, the furniture salesman. The entire decade-long, multi-million-dollar legal empire completely collapsed in seconds. The corporate shareholders lost everything, and George's star witnesses were immediately thrown in prison for perjury. The Druce-Portland Affair remains one of the most spectacular examples of mass delusion and legal manipulation in history. It proves that if you spin a conspiracy theory wild enough, people won't just believe it, they'll literally buy shares in it. If you want to uncover more bizarre evidence from the most chaotic archives of legal history, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time on Exhibit Absurd.